with me today Yarin Eski, Associate Professor at Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, to start with, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, as introduced, I'm an associate professor in public administration at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, VU University in Amsterdam, we say in English. And I'm a researcher and also teacher in the area of security and crime control criminology. I have been researching predominantly maritime security and port security, drugs-related organized crime control and policing. And since a year or so now, I've been involved in what is called space criminology.
Okay. Can you give us a definition of what is space criminology?
First of all, there is no definition of space criminology, and it has to do with the fact that anything you can imagine that takes place on Earth can take place elsewhere regarding crime or deviance or harm. And therefore, there are different approaches to this, different methodological backgrounds, different theoretical approaches. And therefore, space criminology does not exist, but perhaps we could define it as crime and harm taking place in space, even legal harms, for example, eco-crime in space. And therefore, it is a holistic approach, discipline maybe even, that is tied into criminology, public administration, policing, but also international politics, war studies, security studies. So it's also a hybrid discipline.
Mhm. How did you decide to get involved in this field?
Well, there's actually a personal background story to this. I was born and raised in Noordwijk aan Zee, which is where Aztec is located, and
Mhm.
there I learned how to ride my bike literally next to Aztec, and a couple of years ago, my father asked me like, "Hey, are you not a bit tired of this maritime security and port research?" I said, "Well, it would be nice to also have something else to research." And he said, "Do you remember how you want to become an astronaut when you were
Mhm.
young, living next to or living close by Aztec and being very involved in well, the space community there in a way, perhaps indirectly." And of course, as a little kid, everybody wants to become an astronaut. And therefore, I thought perhaps there's something I could do from a criminological angle regarding crime and in space, in outer space. And I looked things up, and there isn't much written still to today about what this actually is, crime in outer space, and how to deal with it, how to understand it. Apart from one academic, a colleague, and I would say a friend of mine now as well, Jack Lampkin. But besides him, there aren't many people really considering space criminology as a serious academic pursuit. So there's a personal reason. I really like everything to do that has to do with outer space and my background, but also I think criminology has something to offer, which is a difficult story, meaning crime can also take place in space, and this is something that you don't really hear a lot about. But I do think it's important to address this as a possibility, especially if human beings are going into space more and more. The risk of crime taking place increases as well.
Mhm. Space criminology is new to academic study. What kind of research is happening now?
So far, which has to do with the fact that space is really hard to reach for us common citizens. So far, it's been almost completely conceptual work. So thinking about what could happen in space in terms of crime. So think about interpersonal violence between astronauts or Space tourists doing something that is not allowed in outer space. However, what is already happening but is not defined as crime in space yet is the harm that is caused by space debris, for example. But also think about how we assume that it's perfectly fine to settle on Mars, to settle on the moon, just because we can. Um, well, this is a big assumption, and also, who are we as a human species to go there and just be there and perhaps cause harm to the environment, harms that we simply are not able to register, for example, or not observe. Um, and there's a big conceptual thinking about that already taking place in space criminology regarding eco crime in space. But
Mhm.
yes, and this is a big gap still, and I hope to change that in the next few years. What about empirical research? Uh, how are we? How can we do empirical research in space? And I have some ideas for that.
Mhm. How can we understand more profound space policy and security?
Uh, to which extent do you mean?
As normal human beings, let's say, how can we understand how what is space policy and how we can secure space?
Ah, right. Okay. This is obviously a difficult question because only what a couple of hundred people have been in space.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's a expectedly $1 trillion industry by 2030, uh, all taking place predominantly on Earth. So I would say, first of all, we need to understand space policy as a Earth-based policy-making effort, uh, uh, because the people who have actually been to space, to which extent do they play a massive role in making policy? So I find that an interesting question. And I think, therefore, space policy is by definition limited. And I think what space or what criminology tends to do in general is, in order to understand criminal behavior, we need to speak to the criminals, to say
Mm-hmm.
it in a very non holistic way. So, if we want to understand what is going on in space anyway, I think we should take those who have been into space far more seriously than we're doing so far. And that is definitely true for space crime, because what is crime? Like sex in space, crime in space is a taboo.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to breach through that. And then I think, expectedly, but I also need to research this. So it's a big if. Then
Mm-hmm.
I think we can expect a far more realistic space policy, and then also a more realistic way of securing space against all kinds of harms and dangers, not just crime.
Mm-hmm. Tell us more about the space criminology website and the community you have built.
Right. Okay. So the website is basically a digital version of what I hope to do in real life, which is bringing together people who are either space scientists in a broader sense, or criminologists who are interested in space, or these space scientists interested in crime, and a mix of this. And we also have some ethicists on there. We've got some practitioners in the space domain. We got eco criminologists there. We got virtual reality expertise in there, and it's a holistic bunch of people. I would like to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is necessary to eventually establish, not just on a website, which is helpful, but in real life, and perhaps even in a international institute that looks at these problems and could also function as a policy advising body, if you like.
Mm-hmm. What skills must someone have to get involved in this field?
Wow, that is a really good question because it's something I'm I'm learning myself at the moment
Mm-hmm.
or trying to learn myself at the moment. To be honest, I don't know. At this
Mm-hmm.
moment, I don't know. However, I think what is uh, important is perhaps an attitude. So, do we want to learn about space crime, first of all? I think that is not just a skill, that is an attitude, a conviction. And I think, yeah, if you want to learn about this, then you know you're welcome, and we need to work together. But also, um, are we not afraid how the overall positive space community for all humankind, hopeful uh, spirit, which is important, how that spirit can also deal with some of the not so nice uh,
Mm-hmm.
elements of being human and therefore also being able to commit crime. Um, I think there's still a big bridge uh, to create between criminologists and the spacefaring community, exactly because it is a difficult topic. And I do notice ever since I started not just the website but also this pursuit of space criminology that more and more people are also from the spacefaring community are willing to talk and sharing their thoughts and their ideas. However, the overall the overall fear of speaking of crime in space still remains. So I think, not just an open mind and a perhaps more realistic attitude towards space, but also how are we going to research this? So thinking outside of the box, what can we use? Virtual reality? Can we maybe observe analog missions and do something with space crime? Um, is there money for that? Because it's already
Mm-hmm.
quite expensive. So why would we even bother ourselves with such a negative topic? Well, because if someone screws up during a mission because he committed or she committed a crime,
Mm-hmm.
then the mission fails. So there's a quite a big um, there's a big consequence of ignoring and denying crime in space. And I think we need um, we need explorers, but also people who are not afraid of tackling the difficult topics.
Mm-hmm. What's the future of space policy and what laws we will see coming into action in the future?
I'm not a legal scholar. I want to say that at first. However, the website, as you may have noticed, has a universal declaration of criminal justice in space, um, which is meant as a tongue-in-cheek kind of um, parody
Mm-hmm.
on reality, which is in reality we don't have such an act, which means so far everything that is out there, including the Outer Space Treaty, the ISS rules and agreements, and some other, I would say, laws that have policy implications. Are they enforceable? How are we going to enforce them? And I think first and foremost, what would be most important is to have a criminal justice act that points out specific organizations with specific authorities to enforce. And this is more of, I wouldn't just call it space criminology, but a space policing and a space criminal justice approach. This is also difficult. Who are we going to make responsible to enforce certain punishable acts, laws that on punishable acts? Who are we give authority for that? Are these the NASA's and the ESA's of this world, or is this an international body? Is this an IGO? Is this a non-governmental body? These are very fundamental questions, and I think space criminology can make a beginning to discuss what should we consider criminal and harmful. But then another question, space policing wise, who is going to police it and who's going to enforce it? And
Mm-hmm.
who's gonna provide criminal justice? Do we have judges at a distance if something happens on Mars? Are we gonna send them along? What about prison systems? And all these questions, yeah, they should be addressed at the same time as what is spacecraft to begin with.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any advice to people who are seeking a space career?
Any advice to it depends on what you want to do, I guess, because
Mm-hmm.
anything that you can do on the planet here is what you could also potentially do on well, outside out of orbit. I guess perhaps maybe more of a sentimental advice, but if you really are a space enthusiast, like I am, despite the fact
Mm-hmm.
that I look at crime, I'm still very enthusiastic about space. You should follow your gut. You should go for it, because I'll tell you something. Within the field of criminology at this moment, space criminology is starting, but there's still the giggly factor, or how do you call it, the giggly aspect of it, where colleagues are laughing a little bit about crime in space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you also need to deal with that. But if you're enthusiastic enough, you can go on and you can prove them wrong later on. But I think that is a very important motivator. And also be realistic, not in terms of just, am I ever going to space? I don't think so. But what can I contribute from here for people who are going to space? And in my case, that is, well, we should consider crime.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because otherwise, we're going to send out people with some false hopes, but perhaps with a bit more realistic hope. I think that is what I would like to do, and I think if you are in that sense involved and engaged in this topic, you should go for it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.